is a topic that it's a new segment that we're gonna introduce, and it's called Team Spotlight, where we talk about a certain team in the NBA, and we talk about how we think they're doing and how they can progress forward, and just all the moves that they did. Let's talk about the team. And this team this week is the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, Jeff, talk to me about the Milwaukee Bucks.
You know, it hurts me to have to speak about the Milwaukee Bucks, but a good breakdown to give before we get into how I feel about them this year and their
Yes.
roster is you look at where they were last year and how they got to the point of at the end of the season they were able to become champions, right? Um Not only was that a confidence boost for their team to win the championship, it's a confidence boost for their superstar and their star to know that they've been a part of this roster, their whole career and they figured it out. It's almost and I don't reckon it to go the same way, but it's almost of the same elk of when Jordan figured it out and finally started winning championships, right?
Yeah.
Is now that I stayed true to it, I figured it out, we found the path to make this work. It should be easier from this point on, right? And what led to even more confidence for this team in my mind is that they had two guys that went to the Olympics as well. They saw gold. They were able to build even more chemistry as a team through that, right? Um, the team was even able in the offseason to bring in some key players like Grayson Allen.
Mhm.
And, they still have guys that need to come back, such as DiVincenzo, that is going to be an added punch to the team. You have Nora. I'm blanking for his first name, but
Jordan.
last year, Jordan Nora didn't really see a lot of playing time last year, as Bren's Forb took a lot of that time, but
Mhm.
now he's getting to fit in that role that Forbes had last year, and he's actually doing pretty well in that role. I like the confidence that I see in him coming off the bench and playing that way. Again, back on Grayson Allen, we spoke about him earlier in the podcast. I think that was the perfect type of pickup for the Bucks in the sense that they were able to get a little bit younger. They were able to get someone that fits right into the mold of their culture and someone that is from the get go going to understand his role and understand that if I continue to do my role, we're going to be a successful team. And that goes to the last part I would say is that this team, with that confidence, with them knowing their roles and the cohesiveness that they have, is what makes them such an unstoppable team. Is granted, I still don't think that they're going to make it out the East this year in my mind, but they're going to be the hardest team to play for anyone in the Eastern Conference this year.
Yeah, I think without a doubt, they are they're pretty damn good. Like there's just a few other things like to add on to like what you're saying. Like they brought in Grayson Allen, they re-signed Bobby Portis, who was pretty huge for them during the playoffs. They signed George Hill, who's a great backup that for them. So far in the preseason and the first game, didn't look the greatest and didn't have the best
Mm.
stat line, but we all know George Hill is actually a good player, and I expect him to step it up. They have Rodney Hood. They signed Semi Ojeleye, who a lot of Celtics fans were very high on, and then when he left, we're not high on. But now Bucks fans are very high on. So interesting to see how he fits in. You have, like you're saying, the newfound confidence of this team. You have Giannis, who seems so far in this preseason in this first game looking to have an improved 3-point shot, which I mean, look at it. When you watch the playoffs last year, so often. When you're defending Giannis, just back up completely and sit in the paint. If he makes the three, you live with it, but you don't want him to get into the paint because he's automatic there. And yet, still last year, even though that was a strategy, he still got in the paint somehow and he still finished. And it was pretty magical to see that. So now if he adds this three-pointer, a consistent three-pointer, it's a very scary team. And you mentioned the Nets. Now, it's pretty tough right now, especially I think with the Nets with Kyrie Irving are the clear favorites. They just have too much star power. But without Kyrie Irving, I think this conversation is a lot closer than a lot of people think. And I mean, this can go into what we just saw in this first game of Milwaukee pulled it out, and those guys, their main guys, looked extremely dominant. And it's the Milwaukee Bucks are a scary, scary team.
I agree. Um, it definitely without Kyrie Irving, it makes that gap a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
To making it out of the East, which granted, I would say, much like you said, after seeing the first performance of the season of what they looked like, it does make you have that cause for pause, and try to figure out, okay, maybe you have to reassess this, and maybe the Bucks, it will come through the Bucks to take the East, right?
Mhm.
But I think that we're really early on into the season. There is going to either be a championship hangover or there's either be a championship high. They will determine that, right?
Yeah.
And being who they are, knowing their team, it seems like it's going to be more of a championship high. But at
Yeah.
some point, it's going to come back down to earth, and you're going to realize, okay, this is really the team that you're going to see, and that's when I really want to assess between those two teams what does that look like. You just going a little bit back on those acquisitions and losses during the season. You mentioned that they brought in George Hill, Rodney Hood, Semi Ojale. That they re-signed Bobby Portis, bringing in Grayson Allen, like I mentioned before. Um, One thing that I actually like for them as well was getting in a multi-year contract for their GM John Horst.
Mhm.
John Horst, honestly, you have to look at what they did as a team to really understand and be able to put the right pieces that always seem to know what they're supposed to do. That's not an easy thing to have a team that has that type of chemistry that always seem to know. And then to something that Charles Barkley was mentioning on Tuesday after the game is when you have a star player that works as hard as that, it's going to make it easier for the other players to work hard as well. So I really do like what they did in the off season. It it is definitely one of the lesser talked about off season, but
Oh,
it
for
is
sure.
just on brand on what type of team that they are. But I will leave off the key loss on this team, and it we will see what that how that impacts this team in this year is PJ Tucker. What does that really mean for this team in the long run when they're making that playoff run? When they need that guy with that toughness, with that background that gives them that last punch? Because there's a lot of times where they needed that from PJ Tucker, and that's what helped them elevate to the level that they got to last
Yeah.
season.
No, he was a great acquisition, mid-season acquisition. If he wasn't there, I don't know if they win the championship last year. Um what I do find interesting, I feel like the PJ Tucker could potentially be a little bit his impact could be a little bit overrated because mainly we hear PG Tucker, the Kevin Durant stopper. But if you really look at it, the Kevin Durant stopper still let Kevin Durant get 30, 40 points a game easily
Mhm,
on him. Like, there is kind of no stopping a player like Kevin Durant and all that. PG
mhm,
Tucker is very good. I feel like with someone like Grayson Allen, maybe you can slide some defensive pieces around. Maybe you put Chris Middleton on more like a small forward type of person, and then you have Grayson Allen attacking that shooting guard or whoever they're playing against. I feel like that's probably where they're gonna move towards. But overall, like you mentioned, I think we're kind of seeing something with the Bucks that are similar to the Spurs, where when Spurs in their heyday, they were mostly like clear favorites a lot of the times, but yet in the offseason, you never heard anyone talk about them. You never heard anyone hype them up, and they're always over are underrated. And then next thing you know, they're winning the championship and they look really amazing. The Bucks are kind of in that situation right now where they're just coming off a championship. They look great. They made amazing moves in the offseason. Exactly the moves that they needed. Are they the biggest moves? No, but they didn't have a lot of room or wiggle room to begin with. And they made some smart moves and they're looking extremely dominant, but yet they're still kind of at the moment second fiddle to a Brooklyn Nets.
I do agree. I actually heard that over a week as well too. Is someone mentioned that they have that very Spurs esque like organization, the way how they go about things, and then
I thought
not
that was
even
the
just
original
that.
take.
It
Yeah.
definitely is not always it's
Yeah.
not always talked about, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like hearing you talk about it, hearing that also earlier in the week definitely made me go like, you know what? Like maybe you
Yeah.
are right about that, you know? But I do I do get jealous, I would say, of how cohesive they are as a team, and we'll see like what that really means because it's definitely gonna be a season that we're gonna have a lot of more bend don't break situations happening because we're gonna see lesser of these situations with COVID where we only see where we may see an incomplete roster. Some days we have to set off some type of guys, load management. It's always going to play a part into the season, but at this point, but we know more more or less of who's going to be on the court when they play these teams and who's going to possibly be out there to play against the Bucks. So I would love to see what the Bucks look like under that circumstances, and then we could assess around 40 games out what they really look like, and truly say, hey, you know what? Maybe this is another repeat. This is the road to a repeat for them this year.
Yeah. No, completely agree. It's this is going to be a fun season. There's a lot of really good teams competing for one goal. And a lot of the previous years, it was just two teams, whoever teams LeBron is on and we're in the Warriors. And that's pretty much it for a decade. And now we actually have some really exciting storylines coming in basketball or just games in general. I think this is actually a good transition